You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerds.
Super nerds.
And as always, I'm with Cap and Alex from the Something Good For You podcast.
Yo, yo. Thank y'all for listening. Been getting a lot of feedback on this show, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in and letting us know your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It's funny.
We read everything.
We do. It's funny. We're almost. It's like we're getting told we're not going full nerd enough.
I know. I love it.
That's great.
Let us know how we're doing. Keep letting us know if we're nerdy enough for you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We're not experts. We don't pretend to be, and we're not. We don't host any sites. We're not. We have no insider status. We're just sort of winging this and having fun with it our own way.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully you're having fun with it too. We're in the transition phase from Dynasty into the Unmasked cycle, I guess you would say.
Yep.
Yes.
And we're also transitioning from the 70s to the 80s.
Yes.
Which
as
is
you
kind
heard
of
our wrap up last week.
Yeah, it's a big jump. And and it seems like a lot of the established groups are like trying to figure out how they're going to transition into the 80s. Somehow this was like a big thing. Like somehow you're turning a major milestone point in the history of time,
right.
The 70s into the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Even the Ramones were addressing it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a big deal. But, it's funny because in the last couple of years, we've seen Kiss change, increasingly stilting more towards a commercial kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see this really at its zenith here. But, they were once perceived as kind of they almost had like a outsider status. They were a cult band, and now it's like they're kind of moving towards more of an elite scene of insiders
mm-hmm.
in a weird way, with Gene dating Cher and then Diana Ross, and they're Paul hanging out at Studio 54, and
right.
It's like you would think that the old Kiss would have been more inclined to be hanging out at, well, if you didn't know better, what, like a CBGB kind of thing or
right.
something, Max's, which of course I don't think was around at that point, but they were never part of that.
No.
They never wanted to be a part of that. You didn't know that if you didn't know anything about them, which of course no one knew anything about them because they worked so hard to preserve that mystique.
Right.
But we've seen them go from the black and silver into the Technicolor Kiss, this so-called super Kiss.
And actually, real quick, just side note, thinking about that even, I'm surprised Ace still didn't. Like, he seems like that kind of guy that still would have snuck out and hung out in areas like that. Like, of all people.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point.
He talks about hanging out with John Belushi in his book.
Yeah. And
right before he died.
Yeah. I'm sure that, there were certain points where those circles intersected.
Yeah, because I know that Marky and Joey of the Ramones have always spoke highly of, like, Kiss in the early days.
Right.
And I know that they kind of intertwine. Like, I know Marky and Peter were/are friends, or in relation to each other.
We talked about Peter being close friends with Jerry Nolan from the Dolls, and later on Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers.
Maybe there's just untold stories of the two of them hanging out in that area. But that would be kind of interesting. Look, I'm going nerdy.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it seems like at this point their whole kind of standing and status is they're getting more and more ingrained into mainstream kind of culture,
big time.
And so, certainly that's by design. And what I don't think they realize is that they've now kind of, they spent since 78 with the movie, the comic book, the toys in specific, not just all the merchandise, but the toys in specific. Mm-hmm. Their fan base has become increasingly younger and younger. And that helps ingrain them more into the mainstream because young kids are not going to be so much inclined to care about, that kind of outsider thing. And
because even if the tour may be dwindling, the mystique is still strong among the fan base.
Right. But straight out of the chute, 1980 begins, and this kind of illustrates where they stand. They're kind of standing in their cultural standing. And I got to thank a listener, Dennis Highland, for bringing this to my attention because I had forgotten about it almost. I hadn't completely forgotten about it, but it fits perfect in the timeline here, and I'm glad he brought it up when he did, so thank you, Dennis. Linda Carter, TV's Wonder Woman, does a television special. And there's a sequence in it where she comes out and she's singing Rock and Roll Fantasy by Bad Company. And then she has her Rock and Roll Fantasy and she visions herself like Tina Turner and I forget who else.
But I think I know what you're going with.
And then she does I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss, right? And they advertise this as Linda Carter with special guest, Kiss.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the way I picked up on it because I remember watching this.
Oh, really? Because I've seen the YouTube clips.
I have a very clear memory of watching this. Okay. And being really, really pissed because it wasn't really Kiss.
No.
We're like, that's not Kiss. Now you can find this on YouTube, and anyone that is listening, I advise you to watch it because Linda Carter's on fucking fire in this thing. And her costume basically looks like she's got her breasts out. Mm-hmm. And I hear as an 8 or 9 year old watching this, I was so pissed off about not seeing the real Kiss that it didn't even occur to me that she looks essentially topless in this thing.
The blind rage of a teenager.
Well, I wasn't even a teenager, so maybe that shows you my hormones had not yet kicked in or something. I don't know. I mean, I thought boobies were swell at that age, believe me, but at this point, swell. It was less swell that Kiss wasn't in this thing, and it was like just a bunch of guys dressed up like Kiss, and I was so angry.
Yeah, they're like background dancers or something like that.
Interesting side note, she's wearing a costume in this thing that gets either recycled or just refashioned, and I don't know the hows and whys behind it. But years later, Gene Simmons is in a movie called Never Too Young to Die.
With John Stamos,
and
right?
He wears this exact same costume.
Yes, he does. I found a thing on Google where the two costumes are Gene and Linda Carter
I don't know if it's the
with
exact same costume or if it's just a remake of the costume.
It's
but
pretty similar.
I can't imagine that Gene would have fit in her size. You know what I mean?
So it was modified. Yeah, I don't know. That is an interesting one. I never really fully thought about that.
So I have that airing on January 12th. So this is straight out of, this is 1980.
Yeah.
The Dynasty Tour has ended a month prior. And here, Linda Carter is a pretty big star coming off the heels of Wonder Woman. She's got her own TV special. And who does she, want to emulate in her show? Is Kiss. So that's how, and everyone knows what Kiss is at this point. I think even if you don't know their names, you instantly recognize the faces and you know what it is. Kiss has finally achieved that status where it's like, again, even if you don't know their names, you know what Kiss is and you know the four faces. You may not even know Demon, Starchild, whatever, blah, blah,
You're just
blah.
like, oh yeah, but I know, I've seen that.
You've seen that, you know what it is.
Oh, that's the band with the makeup.
That's, that's what Little Billy likes. He's got them all over his walls at home. So
aren't they those comic book guys?
Yeah, I mean, but it works. It worked. They're huge at this point.
Wasn't this around the time period when Gene was saying he wanted to be like the Coca-Cola of music?
Yeah,
just easily
that was
recognizable.
Always, he wanted to be like on the same level as Disney, Coca-Cola, McDonald's.
And this is interesting that I'm sure that's kind of Bill a coin also in his ear going, hey,
absolutely.
we could. But it's still interesting to already hear him mentioning that stuff around the Dynasty Unmasked era.
It's interesting also, I think, to note that they have not yet copyrighted the designs of their face paint. That's still in play. That's why I think Linda Carter's able to pull this off without any
red tape.
And really, it's all to the greater glory of Kiss, so I'm sure they would have recognized that anyway, and it probably would have allowed it.
I forgot that they basically got it fully trademarked right as they were taking it off. I forgot about that.
Yeah, which is, we'll talk about that in a future episode, probably the very next one.
Yeah.
On February 8th, this is also a major point that's going on behind the scenes. Casablanca basically officially closes I guess, if you want to call that, and gets enveloped into Polygram. Polygram bought out 50% of Casablanca in 1977. I don't know if we brought that up in the previous episode.
I think we were mentioning that they're already going through different talks with things.
They were originally, we talked about how they were originally being distributed by Warner Brothers.
Yes.
And the original plan was for when, Casablanca was built to fail, quote unquote, and be enveloped into the Warner umbrella.
Right.
And then that fell through. They tried to negotiate a deal with ABC. That didn't work. And somehow they came to form a deal with Polygram, which is a Scandinavian company, I think.
Okay.
And in the process, on February 8th, Neil Bogart resigns, leaves Casablanca. Now, when Casablanca gets fully enveloped by Polygram has to go back and renegotiate the deals with the acts.
Now, is this after Unmasked is released? Because
no,
I think
this is before Unmasked is released. This is February 8th, 1980. So this is still months. Unmasked is probably being recorded during this period.
Okay.
But
because I was trying to think, because I thought Unmasked was the last one released under Casablanca.
No, Creatures of the Night will be the last one released under the name Casablanca.
Okay.
But it's still part of Polygram.
Got it. Okay, got it.
But Polygram has the rights to use the logo and the name and whatnot.
Right. Okay, I understand that.
And the two main acts that they're really wanting to hold on to is Kiss and Donna Summer. Donna Summer bails and goes with Geffen Records. Even though she's still, I think, technically obligated for one more album with them. I think when she did She Works Hard for the Money, that was, I think, a Casablanca record. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure. I meant to research that further. I've dropped the ball on that, but I guess it's irrelevant.
Yes.
The point is that with Kiss, when they had their contract, brought in under Polygram, they had what they called a key man clause, which is, only the biggest acts get this sort of kind of favoritism, and their key man, of course, is Neil Bogart. So when Neil Bogart leaves, that's when they can really renegotiate, because they had the right to terminate their contract, which is what they do. They immediately issue a notice to Polygram that they're leaving the label. And of course, Polygram are like, no, don't go. And it's interesting here because it's Howard Marks that negotiates this deal, not Bill Aucoin.
Oh, okay.
So there seems to be a power play developing between Bill Aucoin and Howard Marks. And we'll see this play out further. But Howard Marks negotiates the new deal for $15 million with a $2 million advance on each new album. And that gives them a royalty rate of $1.20 per unit.
That's
so
pretty.
back then that was a
good
sweet
deal.
fucking deal.
Oh, yeah.
And of course,
it's going to be like the first time the band is actually making money.
Oh yeah. Well, they were. Yeah.
Technically,
probably. Yeah.
Because so much of it was getting cycled back in or in Bill Aucoin's pockets.
They also they recognized this lopsided merchandising deal, which is exacerbated by the overhead and overspending of Bill Aucoin. It's like it's the money came in, but no one knows quite where it went. But they know where it didn't go.
Yeah.
And so they basically terminate that deal with Aucoin and develop a new merchandising deal with 20th Century Fox.
Right.
And it's a licensing deal. So 20th Century Fox, of course, has an established track record with the Star Wars franchise at this point. And so that's what kind of puts them on the map.
Right.
You go, wait, 20th Century Fox, and you think Star Wars. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. So this is all happening while they're, I guess, basically while they're recording. There's a lot. They plan a European tour that was supposed to be, I guess, an extension of the Dynasty tour for Europe. And that was going to begin in March. And then it gets canceled.
Yeah.
And all the dates are rescheduled for fall, and it will be part of the next album's touring cycle. Interestingly enough, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then, of course, the most important thing that goes on during the middle of all this is Peter Criss,
of course,
is fired.
Yeah, and they're not telling the public about any of this.
Nobody knows what's going on here. And Bill Aucoin seeking to preserve the 4 people and recognizing that this is 4 unique personas. You can't just easily replace one.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not. It's not like
it's like the Super Friends.
Yeah, or it's not even. Or I was going to relate it to another band. Any other band. Loverboy. Oh, their drummer quit.
Yeah, who cares?
Who's the drummer in Loverboy? I couldn't tell you the name of the.
I couldn't tell you the singer is.
But I'm just saying, it's not like. And Loverboy was a big band.
Yeah.
But I'm just using that as an example. I don't think they were really popular at this point. But Bill LaCoin recognizes that Kiss, a big part of the whole Kiss thing is the 4 personas, and not just 4 unique personas, but the 4 guys. It's not, it's like you can't. If it would have been like the Beatles replacing Ringo Starr,
right?
You don't replace Ringo fucking Starr. He's Ringo fucking Starr.
Yeah.
But Kiss, of course, has no choice because Peter's kind of made himself. A liability.
A
liability. There you
go.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And he gets a second chance. The story goes.
He
takes drum lessons, and then he shows up to do a rehearsal
of old material,
which was essentially a tryout to see if he could still do it. And he brings sheet music apparently.
Okay,
and the thing is multiple people have called the story back. Like it's not just like one member being a little rude. Yeah. It's like I've heard this from like a few folks, and I'm just like, okay.
If you read Peter's book, he talks about how he does it. He plays badly on purpose just to fuck with him.
I don't
know about that.
That seems like it's like
break the sheet music just to be an asshole.
Why would you do that?
I don't either. It just he talks about how bad his headspace was at the time too, and how he really didn't want to be a part of it.
Well, I can understand that. I can accept.
Yeah,
and that's been pretty obvious for that whole previous Dynasty tour. He just seemed like he wasn't there. He'd already checked out, but he seems to think that he's going to be even bigger than Kiss. He seems to think that, based on his success with the song Beth, that he could do more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Even though commercial his record sales themselves didn't.
Well, no, he hasn't made his first record yet, but
the solo album.
It hasn't come out yet. Oh, the Peter Criss solo album.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, with Kiss. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right, yeah, I know. It didn't do. But hey, cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Right. That probably affected his decision making.
He was heavily diluted with this. So, in the interim, they are recording the album, which will become Unmasked, and they're using Anton Fig on drums again. He played on Dynasty, all but I guess one track.
Yeah,
we talked about that.
Yep.
Now he's playing again on this. There's some stories here. There's a story that suggests that Anton was actually hired to replace Kiss. Replace
Chris.
Replace Peter Criss. And that lasted for all of a day until Gene and Paul kind of had a sit down and were like, wait a minute. Ace and Anton are pretty tight, and that could be a liability.
We don't need a half and half decision making process it was.
And so that gets immediately nixed, like all within a day.
Yes, and Anton's told that story too. He's just like, and Ace called me up and he's like, hey buddy.
Okay, because I've heard another story where he claims he didn't want to leave the band he was in at the time, which was called Spider, who had just charted on their debut single. It was a song called New Romance. Mm-hmm. It's a mystery. But it reached 35, which is a respectable showing for a new band. That band also features a songwriter and singer named Holly Knight.
Yep.
And she would go on to have a very impressive list of top 40 songwriting credits.
Some with Kiss and various members of Kiss.
Yeah. But if you go and look at, I couldn't even begin. A lot with Pat Benatar.
Let's see. I think she's on this album too. She'll play
on Unmasked. Another member in Spider was a guy named Beau Hill, who would become a producer for like Rat. He did the first couple of Rat records.
Okay.
I think he did Winger's first album. So he becomes a kind of a player too. So this band is pretty loaded, this band Spider. So you can see if that could also be a realistic viability at that time.
Spider just formed the 80s, didn't they?
Well, they didn't, but you can see that there was we wouldn't be able to predict the future for these people at that point.
Right.
But, I'm sure they felt pretty good about what they were doing is my point. And I can see why Anton Fig would say, I think I'm just going to sit tight.
Yeah.
And
what's interesting though is they made Peter kind of be silent about him leaving because he's still stuck around for, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but for the Shandy music video.
Well, he's also going to be featured on the album cover and credited. Yeah. The album is released on May 29th, or ships at least that week. I don't know if that's the actual release date. I don't think that's. I think there's a ship dates back then.
Release date
I have May 20th.
Yeah.
Oh well, I have to see. There you go. But it's okay. May.
Yeah.
Later the same week is when they announced that Peter has left the group, and there is no U.S. tour. But we'll get to that. Let's go ahead and jump into this album track by track. Y'all want to?
Absolutely.
Let's roll on in.
It starts with the song "Is That You?" Interestingly enough, not written by Kiss.
How long did it take you to realize that?
How long did it take? I don't know. We used to look at the credits even when we were kids, so I'm sure I knew.
Yeah.
Even then,
it took me a long time to realize that was a cover.
Well, it's not necessarily a cover. Well, I don't think he had recorded it at this point. I think there's a version that he recorded later that I don't even think is like it's more like a demo.
Okay. Was this one of those that was?
But
just
the guy's name is Gerard McMahon.
Yeah. And was this one of those things where the song was kind of shot to Kiss to record or something like that?
That's what I couldn't figure out. I don't know how they came upon this or who brought it to them, or I could see it coming up through Vinny Poncia.
I think I heard an interview, like a short thing with that guy at one point in time on YouTube. If I thought about it, I probably would have looked it back up again. But I think it was honestly a thing where he was trying to be a songwriter, session guy, and was just shopping demos around. And he named someone that may have been Vinny Poncia that just heard it and was just like,
that would seem logical to me.
Just being a producer, hearing demos and, people shopping things around. Because if he wanted to be a session guy, I'm sure he was sending stuff to producers just to be in their back pocket. So who knows? Maybe that was a song he sent.
This is a coup for him for sure.
Yeah.
Or at least he probably thought it was going to be a coup for him. This album sales probably were disappointing.
Yeah,
but on interesting note, do y'all know what other song he's known for?
The Lost Boys song, right?
Yeah, Cry Little Sister. No one on. And the other thing that's interesting about this song is the recording is that there's no other members of Kiss other than Paul on it.
Yep. This is the beginning of like almost every song that features that person. They play almost everything.
Well, it kind of happens in Dynasty too, here and there, doesn't it?
Here and there, but this is a lot more evident.
This shows how heavily fragmented the band has become.
And I thought about that as well.
It's almost like this. Is it even fair to call this a band?
Right. Like after they recorded the solo albums, it's like they all became solo artists in a lot of ways.
The bass player on this is a roadie named Tom Harper, and I believe Holly Knight also plays on this. I didn't write that down.
I just have Anton and Paul on guitar solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a track overall, what's y'all's take on it?
It's not one of my favorites by any means. I think it's one of the... it's not bottom three because I catch myself singing it now that I've played it a few times this week getting ready for it. There's a lot of songs that I don't love, but I catch myself singing out loud on this record. We can talk about it overall as we wrap it up too.
For me, I like it, and I think it suffers the fate that you talk about with Vinny's overall production. I think this is the only song that actually suffers from it because there's great guitar riffs in there, like leading right up to the solo, the chorus. They kind of do that traditional Paul Stanley broken chord riff, and I think that's awesome. It just gets buried in that production. And I just think it could be a lot more beefy.
This whole album seems to have this weird high sheen across the top of it.
It's very
and now
Vinnie
I see
Poncia.
that as a positive on everything except this song. I think this is the only song that suffered from that sort of production. Otherwise, I really like it.
The lyric kind of, and the whole kind of vibe of it has kind of a raunchier vibe. It seems like it would have suited Kiss in theory, but when it put to practice, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
It's not a bad song. It's a little, I'll tell you, it's a little bit kind of, it's weird how edgy it feels for them at this point to use the word bitch.
Right.
Whereas
I thought about that too.
100,000 years, it just seems as natural as breathing, right?
Right.
That shows you just how far they've gone. It's like, ooh, he said bitch.
Whereas
100,000 years, it never even connected in your brain.
Exactly.
And on the Dynasty tour, they were talking about how they couldn't have anybody curse on stage or anything like
but
that.
Here they are, and so that's kind of that's a little odd. But
I will say,
but it's more odd that that it feels so, forbidden in a weird way. Whereas, it shows you just how different they've become in the last couple of years.
I will say the weakest point of the song is the solo section. It just feels a little misplaced, but I like the way they come back out of it with the falsetto vocals. You always get, and how it kind of builds back up on the bass, and then the guitars bust back in. I think that's really cool.
This sort of sets the vibe and tone of the record, and the vibe and tone of this record seems like they're trying to go for. And this is just me. This is my opinion, but it feels like they're going for like that convertible,
Fast Times at Ridgemont High. High school party thing.
But there's one song that totally fits those style movies we'll talk about later on. But there's one that really fits that.
All of it's trying to be that kind of almost like a West Coast vibe. Yeah. But this album still feels very New York Night to me.
I would agree.
It's
I would
New
fully
York,
agree.
And that's where I think the great failing of this album is on its whole overall level. But I guess we'll discuss that when we wrap it up.
But yeah, honestly though, I do love the production on the record. I just think this is the one song that just suffers from it because I think it would suit better under a Love Gun or Rock and Roll Over production.
Except for that one pre-chorus, like you were talking about, that is by itself. That's the one part of the song where it makes me go like, "Oh, this song isn't so bad."
Well, I don't know. It doesn't stretch so much as it does sort of sashay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely sachets.
You're swinging instead of swinging its hips, it's swinging its shoulders.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. It really makes sense.
All right, and let's go on here because it's not going to get better. We get the song Shandy.
Yes.
When I first heard this song, I thought it was the Doobie Brothers.
Really?
When I was a kid. Yep.
Weird. I don't hear Doobie Brothers, but I don't really hear much of anything. I can see this being like a big mainstream hit, and it's definitely tailored towards a mainstream taste. But it's interesting because you know what the inspiration of this song was? The initial inspiration was the song "Sherry Baby" by Bruce Springsteen. Oh. Which is nothing like this song at all.
So I'm like,
nothing like this song at all. He just the name alone is where he picked up on it.
Yeah, and this has Tom Harper on bass, Holly Knight on keyboards, Paul on lead.
Oh, there you go.
Again,
another Sands and anyone else member.
If you listen to it now, you can start picking up on Paul's style and his lead style, and you can start noticing the differences here.
He's got some great guitar solos on this record overall, though.
Yeah, I think Paul is, he's a serviceable lead guy. He's not a flash player by any means, and I wouldn't see him as a standalone player as a lead guitar player. And neither does he see himself that way.
But he's really good at backing up a solo.
He services the song well.
And because especially it's not a complicated song, he doesn't need a complicated solo. No. He needs harmony over it. He doesn't need a solo, and that's really what his style is. He more or less gives a big open harmony riff and with a little bit of flair at the end.
This song, I don't understand. It was a hit in Australia, but it's in other countries, but it didn't chart in America, I don't think. And I'm kind of surprised because coming off of the success of I Was Made for Loving You, I wouldn't see radio programmers being so reticent as to adding something like this because it seems so tailored for top 40 radio. And I can see it being a popular song. And you can't help but go, what if, had this been released, had it been a hit, but then again, back then radio programmers had a lot more independence. It's not like today where everything's corporatized. You got one guy programming the entire nation. Each market had its own individual person programming, and then they had to pick and choose the songs.
Thanks, Clear Channel.
They could have just as easily still rejected when it was rejected because Kiss had become this little kiddie fad.
Yep.
They weren't going to, but had they
been forced to play it,
if
basically.
they had played it, who knows, and maybe you would have seen another year or two of this Kiss thing extend.
And honestly, for me, I've gone through phases of liking and hating this song, and honestly, I put this right in the middle like I do Is That You? Again, I love this record. I like this song, but if I'm having to rate them, it really does fall in the middle for me because it's there are really good moments. I like when they come out of the guitar solo and you've got all the extra little effects and he's like, say goodnight. And I love Anton as a drummer and he's got this awesome little offbeat heading back in. So
how was that again?
No, we're not happy. We'll have a 1980s review, I'm sure. Thank you, Barry. But those moments like that is what makes the song enjoyable. And honestly, props to Anton. I think if any other drummer was trying to play it, it probably wouldn't be as enjoyable. But he is such a good rhythm player. Rhythmist.
Is that even a word?
It is today.
I was listening to that. I found myself zeroing in on these drum tracks and realizing there's stuff that Anton's doing on it that if you're not really paying close attention, and really you're probably not supposed to, but it's pretty clever.
It is.
And he's doing stuff that, it's almost like they didn't tell him play like Peter Criss. And it's nothing that Peter could have ever, and if you watch, he's doing this kind of off time signature on the hi-hat kind of thing. Not off time, but
it's kind of like
he's not doing
weird
a straight
double time.
Yeah, he's not doing a straight 16 thing, which if you watch the video when Peter does it, he's just doing the straight 16 thing. And it's it's
almost got a shuffle to it.
Yeah, and that's not to shit on Peter at all.
It's not. He
just
didn't care.
He's a complete different type of drummer. And I think that's part of what anchored Kiss and made their sound and that chemistry work in its time.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how that changes as they transition to a new drummer. But in the interim, we've got Anton, who's kind of already suggesting, there's stuff they could be doing that they're not.
Yeah. But honestly, for me,
is it better for the band?
I don't know. I kind of put Dynasty and Unmasked kind of in their own league because of Anton. Because again, we praised him so much with the Ace record, because he and Ace just have such a good groove. Well, he's shown now that he and Paul have a good groove.
Well, I think Anton's just a pro.
Yeah.
And is able to do it. I think it has less to do with necessarily even how he's playing as how the whole thing is produced. I think the big reason why these two records stand alone off to the side from anything else they did was because of Vinnie Poncia.
Yeah.
And again, they both feel very New York to me in a way.
And I love that.
And what makes this record interesting to me is just that they're obviously trying to get kind of almost like a West Coast kind of vibe off of it, this summer kind of thing. Maybe I just associate it with summer because it came out right at the beginning of summer, so I don't know. But
I mean, I see where you're coming from on that, but I think I kind of relate it more to what you were talking about that they were actually doing. This almost feels like the glam of the Studio 54.
Yeah, it's very post-disco. Yeah,
so I see where you're coming from, and by saying it still feels New York, it just feels like it's almost glitzy New York.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
not
what I mean.
The West Coast.
It's very. That's what I'm saying. It's like they're trying, but they don't. They're still coming from where they're from.
Yeah,
and that's maybe that's a failing. Maybe I don't know.
It's interesting.
It doesn't. It seems like they're trying to create a suburban pop record, but they can't break free of that urban vibe. Does it make sense?
It does,
Yeah.
but I think that's what still makes it enjoyable for me is because it has that.
But
it
I
still
think
has a little touch of realness, whether they like it or not.
Well, and I feel like if they had just gone for it that way and maybe kept a little more grit into it, and it wouldn't have been so high sheen. But then again, it was 1980.
We hogged this one. Cap, what do you think?
I think it's a great song. I agree with a lot of the points that you guys make. I think it's a little too the recording of it is very shimmery and a little schmaltzy, but I still think it's a great song.
I mean, this is true of the whole album, though.
Yeah.
Following now, Talk to Me.
Yes.
One of the 3 Ace songs on the album. 3 songs on this album.
Yeah.
The highest showing yet for Ace Frehley. And he's going to come out of this going, they just wouldn't give me enough room.
I know. Dude.
Pay attention, Ace. You got 3 fucking songs on this goddamn album.
Yeah.
And none of them are particularly good, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and this is another one. Anton on drums, but Ace on bass and guitars.
This is Ace's. Yeah, Ace is giving a lot of freedom on this.
My notes here say Anton on drums, Ace Frehley on bass, and lead Trout.
Lead Trout.
I'd argue that this is the most classic Kiss sounding track on the record.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't.
As far as like the grit that we're looking for on this record.
And
maybe,
honestly,
but it's a very pop song.
It is, but
and I've been prepping for this episode ever since we finished the Dynasty. Like even for like the Dynasty tour, I was already kind of prepping for this episode. I forgot how good that Ace solo is. Like he kind of does the Paul thing. He starts with the harmony and it just kind of walks it down.
Right.
That has to be in probably my top 3 favorite Ace solos. Like take the song out of it, he just does such a great job on that song.
Well, it services the song. He's not overplaying. I mean, Ace was never one to overplay anyway. But yeah,
I love
shows,
that solo.
I think, I think Ace is a lot more talented than he lets on, but it seems like sometimes like a song like this, it's a good song, but it's not a great song.
I think it's the best of the 3.
I agree with that.
It's oddly an innocent song, if that makes sense. Like the lyrics.
I actually used the lyrics recently just because I like it. It's just
very,
like it's
very almost very sweet.
You know what it reminds me of? Power pop songs.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say that was kind of that was in vogue at that point. I don't know how much of an influence that might have had at that for them. I who's to say?
Because it oddly worked. Like I had just a random mix of like just different power pop things, and then I was like, oh yeah, shit, I got to do. I want to listen to this album again to get more familiar with it. And it's like, and I just clicked "Talk to Me" first, and it's like all of a sudden it's like I heard the guitar riff, and I heard it. It was like it almost kind of had. Hear me out. I played them back to back. It works. It almost has a jangly Tom Petty vibe. That
oh yeah, I can kind of hear that.
And I was like, oh shit. And then it's like even the drums kind of had that steady kick, almost kind of vibe to it. And I was like, the bass, doom, 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 doom. And it's like all of a sudden I heard it as a power pop late 70s song. I was like, wow, this maybe Ace really was trying to go for that sound.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't think Ace was a guitar player, but I don't think he was ever really into guitar rock as much as more kind of standard pop kind of thing.
Because we even see it a little bit on his record with What's on Your Mind.
Well, yeah, and and I'm also thinking ahead of the curve when you think about I don't know if y'all have ever heard any of the demo stuff he was doing prior to doing his Frehley's Comet thing. There's a lot of keyboard driven stuff.
Oh yeah. A lot of electronic drums.
But it's hard to say. I don't, who knows where Ace is
head's at
any given moment. So what's your take on it?
It's my favorite Ace track on the album.
Oh yeah, you said that.
Like I was saying earlier, it's like the hardest sounding song on the record. For that gritty Kiss sound that we're all familiar with and love, that we're looking for on this. This is the song that has it more than the rest.
I'd say it's in my top 3 for the record too.
Mine too.
It's funny you say that about power pop. I got that written down later for another one of the tracks.
I agree.
It seems influenced by the skinny tie power pop of the era.
I agree. I think I know where we're going with that one too. But
we'll get
maybe this is a weird lost like it got mixed in with the disco, but maybe it was meant to be the Kiss power pop record.
I think it's just that they're so fragmented. They're coming in from different directions, and then the production has to tie it together somehow.
Right.
And I think that's part of the failure of this record is that there's no cohesion.
No.
And to illustrate that point, let's go to the next song, Naked City.
Yeah. Where it completely breaks away from the mold almost, except for like the verses.
Right.
A lot more of a darker feeling song.
This definitely retains a New York thing. I mean, it was, you know, what's interesting though, you got 3 additional collaborators.
Yeah, we got
Pepe Castro of the psych garage group Blues Magoos.
That's a name.
Well, the Blues Magoos had some hits in the late 60s. They did a cover of Tobacco Road.
Blues Magoos Weekend 2.
And then they had a song called We Ain't Got Nothing Yet, which if you heard it, you'll know it. It used to be a standard on oldies radio, and it was a big hit in the late 60s.
I'll have to look that up after this.
But what's interesting about that song, and I don't know why this didn't connect with me prior, if you listen to that, there is a coming out of the chorus, there's this break where they do this descending guitar line, and it's identical.
Really?
Identical to the Love Gun lead break
at
the end of Love Gun.
Oh, huh.
Yeah. Very similar anyway. And I don't know how if one calls to the other or not. It's just interesting. And now here you've got Pepe Castro actually, you know, collaborating. But I don't think Ace plays on this track.
No. Bob Kulick gets credited as a co-writer.
But Pepe Castro had also been in the band Balance that we talked about, opened on the Dynasty Tour, a few dates on the Dynasty Tour. So
probably made a connection.
He ends up popping up here and there, I think, in future Kiss.
I know the name.
I'm pretty
sure once we start getting into the
participated with some Ace songwriting credits in the future, but we'll get to that. You know what? I got 3 additional. I didn't write down who the other collaborator is on this.
I was saying it was Bob Kulick.
Bob Kulick, yeah.
And honestly,
who probably plays guitar
probably
on
the
track.
lead on it,
yeah. And I don't know, the song overall, I do like it, but it does seem very different than the rest of the song so far. Does that make sense?
It's you know, it's funny because for all the kind of, we just talked about the innocence of Talk to Me lyrically and stuff, it's almost like a good teenage pop song. Naked City is more of an adult song.
Because it's Gene Simmons being a creep like he always is.
No. You know what? He spins it in this one. It's older women with younger men.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to, you know, when I saw you coming out of school that day.
It's weird when I sing this song. When I was catching myself singing this song out loud, I was caught myself singing X-Ray Eyes along with it too.
Yeah, I mean, it has a generic. There is a generic quality that you can see the two blending together. You know, and sometimes it kind of feels like they're not even trying. And let's go into the next song for that. What Makes the World Go Round. This is not good. I just think this. I can remember reading an article in the mid '80s written by a girl who had been a big fan of Kiss in the '70s and then missed out on the '80s stuff, and so she went back and wrote these little capsule reviews of all the albums from post 1979, and she said that she said this went from, like, I forget. One of the words she used was boring. And I think she used this song as the reference point. It's like, this song is this is the most mediocre song on the, it really is. It's just not good.
I don't hate the song, but I picture in my head Paul Stanley in that elder costume with the headband on a treadmill.
You're right. I love your imagination. I have never seen
just like 80s cheesiness.
It's just me. Yeah, that's what I wrote. Mediocre dance pop. And it's like, it's not even catchy enough to really be a good pop song.
And it's unfortunate because the guitar nerd in me loves the guitar riff.
You know what? It's not the riff. He does the lead in it, and he does this little descending thing that I think they put some sort of delay on or whatever. That's the only part of the song that seems to have any kind of...
Yeah, and that's why I said the guitar nerd in me is because I have to agree with you guys, even though I do like the song. I do like it. I do have to agree that it's very generic, mediocre, but then what makes me like it, though, is the guitar nerd in me going, it's like, oh, it is such a cool little riff, and but no, I agree. Even though I love it, I have to agree.
Just that minor key shift on the chorus. And I found out.
And again, one thing we've not mentioned, Paul is killing the vocals on this record. Like even during Shandy, like his vocal tone is great all throughout this. So it's like that's another thing that really saves it is Paul is really finding his falsetto, he's finding his baritone, he's really finding it a lot more and exploiting it more.
He's coming out of that sassy rock and roll Paul Stanley.
That's all well and good, but he didn't write a good song here. This is
I'm just saying.
This isn't even a good. I mean, this isn't even a good. This not a good song.
But in contrast, the next song.
Oh,
go to side 2.
Yeah, this is the standout track on the album, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I can't believe this wasn't a hit. And that's the song Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. And it doesn't even this. Okay, the contrast. It's like it's almost like he's working, trying to make what makes the world go around work. But Tomorrow just felt like it was effortless.
Yeah.
It's
and it has beats of What Makes the World Go Round, but better.
It's not trying to be intelligent. It's not trying to be anything of what it is, which is a really catchy song.
Yeah.
Every time I hear this, I just keep coming back to it. I'm just like,
it's good.
This is a great song. I could see this being a big hit if it were in the hands of someone like Sammy Hagar or Rick Springfield.
Yeah, but I think because it was Kiss.
But it was Kiss, so again, radio wasn't going to touch it.
Yeah,
because the VAB was over, and it was the Kitty makeup band.
And since I don't have to defend this song as much, I can actually talk about the minutia of it. My favorite damn part of that. Guess what the best part of that song is, and it only happens once.
What, the part where he says, "I didn't know what to say," and it just goes.
yes, that is my favorite fucking part.
So he doesn't even bother with a lyric there. That's great.
I love it.
It's so clever. I like it. I like it a lot too. Another one thing we haven't touched on really is that how Vinny Poncia has songwriting credits on a good chunk of the songs on this album.
Well,
this is basically a Vinny Poncia record.
There's every song on this is a co-write. Every single one, I think, except maybe Ace's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But no, exactly what you guys said, though. No, this is actually my favorite on the record. You're talking about top threes. This is my number one.
I can't believe that this radio didn't pick up on this, because this could have been. I can hear this as being a big radio hit for a big summertime hit.
I feel that way about that one, the same way I feel about Tomorrow and Tonight. But I feel like both of those songs are lost gems.
I'm also speaking. I can remember the summer this album came out, and I could have. It's still knowing what was popular in that moment and what was else being played on the radio. It just seemed like perfectly tailored for it. It's like, you wouldn't even have to think about it. And it's like the only reason why this wasn't, readily accepted was because people were just so turned off on the Kiss thing. They had just overkilled everything. It's just a shame. It worked to their disadvantage.
But I think this is the other lost power pop song.
Oh, this is again, like I said, I think this is the standout track on this album. Two Sides of the Coin. Another kind of. All these songs are really poppy.
Yeah. And this one's fun. It's just, to me, a little bit more forgettable than Talk to Me.
Yeah. I'm not super fond of any of these Ace songs, interestingly enough, how much I love the Ace solo album. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's like.
Well, you didn't like 2000 Man either.
Well, I didn't like the cover of it. But I mean, I like it okay. It's almost like. I don't know. He's trying, but it's just not
hitting.
Not hitting.
Yeah, it's kind of utterly. It's not forgettable, but it's kind of meh to me too. There's a lot of songs on side 2 of this record that that aren't super memorable for me.
And another song in which he doesn't really solo. Because he says choose one, and then it's all harmony.
Yeah. But
and then it's a drum solo.
That middle part there, and it's got the big fills in it.
That's the part of the song that sticks out for me, is that little drum part that Anton does.
And again, I think he's the kind of silent hero in this whole record. I think he ties it together and makes it fun and enjoyable. It's weird. A member of Kiss, not even an official member of Kiss, is tying it all together and making it enjoyable.
That just shows how creative Ace and Anton were when they got in the room together, too.
Well, I wonder how much of that is Vinny Poncia, too, because that feels like a Vinny move.
Hard to say. I don't know. I would think that they probably came in pretty fully developed and didn't take much to whittle down.
Yeah.
She's So European.
This one's all right to me. Like, I don't hate this song either, but it's a fine Gene Simmons song for this record. It's probably my favorite Gene song on this album, quite frankly.
Out of these two albums, which we've already said kind of are standalone albums in the Kiss canon, this is my favorite Gene song of the two.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And honestly, we kind of talked about it on the Something Good For You episode of the Kiss Cruise, but seeing them attempting to play this live, honestly, it was fun. It works in a live setting, like, because I don't think they said they've ever played it live before or something like that. Like, that was the very first time that song's been pulled out. Yeah. And yet, in a room with everyone that actually knew it and everything else, it actually really did work if Gene just had not rushed the verses.
That's all I picture now whenever I hear this song.
It's and it's cynical, but it's clever in its cynicism. I think, and this feels a little more, not adult, but, it's like there seems to be an acknowledgement that their fan base has gotten younger, and now they're trying to write these more sophisticated, quote unquote, kind of songs, and
wait till the next record.
Yeah. Yeah. But, just the whole idea of, like, it's still sleazy Gene, though. It's like, what's he say about her age? There's a point. There's something about, she makes love on a brass bed because her parents are still away.
Yeah.
Her parents are still away. Yeah, and
I will say, I like all the keys in the song, like where the solo's supposed to be, and it kind of does like that fuzzy Korg kind of keyboard bit. It's pretty cool.
But what the change is on some of this too is that, as far as the lyric goes, is the power structure has shifted from the Gene persona to the girl herself. She's the one that's controlling, she's the one that's manipulating, she's the, it's all.
And we would see that in his songwriting a little bit later. This is almost like Gene's kind of answer to feminism. Gene, right. the feminist icon, Gene Simmons. Yes. Well, I mean, not a yeah, and not that it's a good song, but we do later see that sort of songwriting style in Domino.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to get to that.
That's a loaded song in itself.
Yeah. So easy as it seems. Apparently it isn't.
No. my least favorite Paul song on the record.
This song is as equally bad as What Makes the World Go Round.
I like What Makes the World Go Round.
I was gonna say I like that one a little better.
This is maybe. Yeah, this is like a throwaway.
At least with What Makes the World Go Round, you can sit here and imagine like Studio 54 found out. Yeah, like you can imagine. You can't imagine anything during this song.
Every time I hear the song, I instantly forget it. There's nothing that stands out on it. There's nothing that comes out to me.
And I really do like this record. This is my least favorite. No, I can't. This is usually the one I skip, and that's amazing considering the next song too. But we'll get to that one also.
I mean, there's really nothing else to say about this, so let's just keep it rolling.
Okay, well, Torpedo Girl.
See,
is this Rocket Ride Redux?
Badly. I was playing this album last night at my girlfriend's house, and she was a good sport about everything. She's like, keep playing all the Kiss songs. Keep playing all the Kiss songs. I was like, really? Okay. And the Torpedo Girl comes on, and she's like, this is what y'all are talking about tomorrow?
Stop playing the Kiss songs.
I'm like, I know, it's bad.
It's a would-be funk rock song.
Yeah.
It's got the funky bass line, but it doesn't really have the feel.
And it's an funk. Ace bass line. There's no one else other than Ace that could have thought of that at the time.
I mean, I guess maybe Gene could have, but I'll tell you what, we'll go back to this again. And go back and listen to it again and give it another whirly whirl and listen to the drum track, especially towards the end.
Oh yeah.
And you got the double kick, which is an unusual signature because Peter never used double kick.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
And it's just the drumming on this really puts it over. But otherwise, it's actually, I guess it's clever. It's the best of the three Ace songs in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd say it's my least favorite, but it's like, as much as I've been goofing on it, I hadn't said once that I hated it or I disliked it. It's just a silly, forgettable song, but I don't know. and I guess this is where nostalgia lenses come in. I remember listening to this record a lot, like when we first got the CD, and I had to have been, pretty young at the time. Mom got this one pretty early on when we were rebuying the CDs, the remasters. And I don't know, just something about the song attracted the kid in me. It almost sounded like a cartoon theme song. Like even the guitar, with the way it had like the different little walk downs and stuff. And it, on the surface, sounds like a very innocent song. Thought I'd go out for take a swim today. And it's just, so you would think, that it's pretty as they get older and you're like,
this is some dumb Spinal Tap lyrics. Okay,
it is.
No question about it. I mean, this is a lyrically lazy song.
Very.
But you can hear, though, musically, you talk about that kind of what you felt was innocent. People might say I'm crazy for thinking this, but I can hear weaving in kind of a almost like Beach Boy kind of idea. It's like, he's Torpedo Girl. He's already thinking surf. Even though, where you gonna go surfing in the East River, I don't know. Yeah, but it's there. I feel it, but and there's the harmonies in it and all that, but still, it's anchored by this really great drum track.
Yeah,
and he's not, and one thing about Anton, it's not like they're not going for like a Led Zeppelin bottom heavy blah blah blah, which is what they would. Everyone tries to do,
right?
Which is whatever. We'll get into that, but it's very tight. It's very punchy, and it punctuates everything perfectly.
Doesn't overstep it.
It doesn't, but it's still a clever, and not just standard drum beats.
Yeah,
it makes it. It's just interesting. It's not like complex and like. A Rush kind of way where you need to sit there with your pipe and your wine and your cheese and your
like
whatever.
me.
But then this album closes out with "You're All That I Want."
This song has grown on me over time.
We have the hindsight now of having since heard the demos for this stuff. And I think the demo for this works better than the actual finished part.
Because it starts with the acoustic and everything else.
And it has a much more of a, and I think it was intentional, that Beatley feel. And that's, Gene getting off on his Beatles nut. And
he plays,
and it's odd for me that they've scrubbed all this off. And I've got my notes I've wrote, this scrubs all the Beatle off for a dullness that defies the potential of the song.
Yeah.
Because the song is better than this recording is.
Mm-hmm. And he plays all the rhythm guitars on it too. Yeah.
It's just I can hear that now that you say that. But it just seems like that the way the demo worked, it was more of a ballad. It had more Beatley feel, and I think if they had just pulled that out more and retained that more, then I think it would have. I think the song really would have worked. In a much better way.
And Paul does the lead on it too, so it's like you've already got his, Paul Stanleyism harmonies kind of thing rolling with it. The two of them working together for a Beatles-esque song.
Right.
It's kind of hard to fail. They've had so much success with it in the past.
It's hard to fail, but they do.
Yeah, a little bit.
And Vinnie Poncia had the fever. And you know what that fever was for? More cowbell.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Which you get.
Oh, yes.
And Gene,
and I like that. I like it a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, they've made it more of a hard rock song and took the Beatle out of it. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that Gene's bass tones. I love the bass tone on this and all the bass tones that Gene has all over the record. I thought they sounded really good, particularly in Naked City.
Oh, yeah, and that's where it kind of goes back to where I say I love the production on this whole record. I just think the only song that kind of suffers from the production is That You? What do you guys think of this as the closing song? Because we kind of discussed that too, as like the song that, is this a good opener? Is this also a good closer?
We talk about side two, about how there's a lot of tracks that we don't particularly care for. So it's just the whole side two just kind of feels just a little out of sorts in a lot of ways anyway.
I think it would have worked better if they had Tomorrow as the end song.
I think so.
You're kind of
a
right
lot more
on that.
upbeat.
Yeah.
It would, this is almost a melancholic kind of fade off into the.
Or if they had done the original demo version, that would have been a good
maybe
ending.
it would have still could have worked, but this doesn't work for me. I think, and again, it's not fair because now I've heard the demo and I hear how much, and even the demo isn't.
It's not.
It doesn't have full potential, but you hear the potential. You hear what it could have been.
And it's still not a fantastic song. It just could have been better than what it was.
Yeah. So overall, this whole album, what do y'all think?
I have a weird affection for this record, man. I don't know why. Like, even like while we were kind of discussing it, and I had to be, kind of critical over some parts of it that are very genuine. I don't know. I still go back to this record and listen to it almost front to back often. Like, I don't know. There's just something about it that always draws me back in that I just really enjoy for all the cheesiness aside, all the, everyone just playing on their songs and no one else's, it almost being individual solo record songs, so to speak. I don't know. Something just I always liked it.
As a fan, it's a very interesting album, and there's some great songs on there. And I think the mystique and the knowledge of all the moving parts and who all is playing on what song kind of makes it more interesting than the quality of the record itself. And I've grown to like Vinnie Poncia's studio production work over the years too, or at least with these two records. And there was a point where I didn't care for this era of Kiss at all. But I don't know, with us going through the knowledge and the backstory of all this, it adds to it.
I think, you make a good point. I think for what they're trying to achieve, they achieve it, and that's largely on the credit of Vinnie Poncia.
Yeah.
I think he's done a really good job with both these records. It's a lot stronger than I think people want to give it credit for, because it just gets lost in the shuffle because it's more of a pop album, and you're not judging it against the other so-called pop music of its time.
You're judging it against Dynasty.
You're judging it against all of Kiss.
Yeah.
You're judging it, they're like, Kiss is no longer Kiss at this point, which again, we've talked about that, and they're not trying to be.
Yeah, but
then again, maybe they are just being Kiss. Maybe this is where they were always going to be headed anyway.
Yeah.
But then that, it suggests that maybe they never had any integrity to begin with, which would, of course, only give more credence to their critics, And a lot of Kiss fans got turned off by this in a big way, which obviously, history has shown to be true.
Yeah.
And this isn't rock and roll over by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
and it's hard to believe that this is even the same band. But really, it's so fragmented at this point, it can't be the same band. And they're all kind of riding on their own success and their own egos.
And it's like, and we've still got plenty to talk on this episode, but that becomes even more evident, I would say, on the next record.
Well, the next record, things are really left field. It's got an interesting cover. It's a comic strip cover, and it's illustrated by a guy named Victor Staben, I guess is how you pronounce it. And the poster that's on the inside is one of the panels reproduced, but there is a notable difference between the cover and the poster.
Yes, because the panel that's reproduced as the poster is the big final shot at the very bottom, because the panels
where they're unmasking.
Yes, because the panels show this photographer paparazzi dude.
He's trying to catch them without their makeup.
Yeah, and they keep thwarting it in every direction. They're finally like, okay, fine, we'll show you our faces, and it's like they take off what looks like masquerade masks.
Yeah,
and underneath is like the makeup
it's
and
still
all that.
Kiss.
Right. Yeah, so that panel is reproduced as the poster.
Right. But do you know what the difference is between the two?
I know what it is. Do you, Cal?
I do not.
So on one of them, on the album cover, everyone is just looking straight forward. It's kind of you can actually find the photos they reference for that album cover. But Peter's just looking straight forward, in the comic panel. On the poster, he's winking.
Oh, okay. So they point that out here in the notes too. So I didn't know if that was what you were going to refer to.
He's winking. It's
supposed to be a weird nod.
This is Peter's wink that
he's out the door.
I'm out the door.
Yeah.
This album peaks at 35, which is the lowest peak position of any Kiss album since Hotter Than Hell, and it sells. It gets gold. It hits 500,000, but I think it stalls out at about 750,000. So it doesn't quite make platinum. So, I mean, you know, it's a modest success.
But they find a new market or capitalize on a new market.
Well, they're getting ready to. But in the process of this, we get a new drummer before they can go tour. They've got to replace Peter. So they put out, you know, I guess, word that they're auditioning drummers. I think I saw names that there were people that were interested that they just dismissed out of hand, like Carmine Apiece. And I want to say there was another one whose name I can't remember now. It was surprising to me, and I was like, that can't be right. And I want to say it was
see.
Oh God, I have Alzheimer's. I'm convinced.
Old timers.
Cozy Powell.
Okay.
And I'm not 100%. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I've read that somewhere. I was like, that seems kind of like odd.
I don't know. He had that swing though. He had that hard hitting swing.
Right.
But
yeah. But I mean, they didn't want anyone that was established or known because they needed to develop a new identity. This is an awkward spot for them to be in because, like we said, how do you replace Ringo Starr? How do you replace Peter Criss?
Yeah.
And the deal is they're just going to do it. And there's nowhere else to go with it. So, you know, they have to hire somebody.
Speaking of, I've got a list of folks that who have been rumored to or have actually auditioned. We have names that include Charlie Benanti from Anthrax. We have Barry Brandt from Angel. Casablanca label mates. We have Chuck Billings from Virgin that Gene Simmons produced. So there's a lot of guys that were like in the circle and everything. We have Hirsch Gardner from New England that we mentioned on another episode, and Carmine, like you mentioned. We have Richie Fontana, who was in Billy Squier's band.
That's the other name I really remember.
Wasn't he in Stars too?
I think so.
He plays on I think he plays on Peter's solo record.
I think so.
Not Peter's
He's on one of the solo records.
Paul's solo.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the more outlandish claims, but Ringo Starr is on this list.
They may have wanted. I don't think he ever reached.
I doubt that on any level.
That's like the only one that's like the superstar name out of this list, other than Tico Torres from Bon Jovi. But you know, whatever.
Well, they hire a guy named Paul Caravello.
Yep.
Lonely stove cleaner.
Yeah, he interviews with Bill Aucoin on June 19th, and then he auditions on June 23rd, and he gets a callback audition on June 27th. Now that's June 27th. Now, and then he gets hired, and he's hired. This is important to note. He's not hired as an equal member of the band. He's a salaried employee.
Yep.
And Kiss's new contract that Howard Marks has renegotiated is for Kiss is defined as Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Ace Frehley.
Yep.
So he's never going to be a true quote unquote member of Kiss, which will always stick in his craw. It's just on paper. Yeah. But you know, it's still this has got to be a big deal for, you know, an unknown guy from New York.
I still love the story that Gene and Paul tell often, which is during his first tryout. He didn't think he was going to get the call back, anything. You know, he was just like, he's wanting to try out. And at the very end of it, he asked them all for their autographs on a record.
Yeah.
And he was just like, and they're like, really? I mean, you just hung out with us for the whole day. And he's just like, yeah, but
I'm probably never going to see you guys again.
Yeah, basically, but was still just, it still had, like they said, just that sweet boyish charm that was just like, you know, he would actually be kind of a breath of fresh air in the band. It would be nice to have someone that's kind of happy and joyful around, which is how everyone always referred to Eric. So
it's not going to threaten to quit the band every 5 days.
Yeah.
Well, they hire him. And now they've got to determine what's his character going to be. And so they seize upon the idea of a hawk.
The Hawk.
And of course, much has been made of this incredibly corny looking suit they make that looks like a Big Bird suit. He looks like an orange Big Bird.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's bad. There's like photos that, like, I think a coin like later released or something, like Polaroids of it, and it's bad.
And to his own credit, he develops the Fox persona,
because that was the Gene and Paul management thing. They're like, you'll just be the Hawk.
Yeah.
But like, I think it was like a few hours before a photo shoot.
I don't. There's a lot of different stories about this.
The story I know is like it's either a few hours before a photo shoot or a show or something, but it was like at the 0 hour.
He comes up with the fox,
and they just like retailer a suit, like they just like run around the house or like different stores, pick up different pieces, and just like piecemeal something together and just like get it done at the 0 hour.
Yeah, and the thing, he gets his debut on July 25th at the Palladium in New York. Now, before we get to that, just think about that. His callback edition was on June 27th, and somewhere between June 20, probably that same week, he gets hired. But still, that's a very short period of time. You've got 1 month, to get your shit together, to learn a set, to have your character in play, blah blah blah. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that you're throwing on this. He's
new kid.
He's not a kid. He's 30 years old. 31 years old. So he's already had, he had a few history.
Bands.
I mean, he's the same age as the other guys. It's
still
just
no pressure, right?
Yeah, the pressure's
still thrown
on
in the deep end,
and they pull it together. And
his name is Eric Carr, and he's incredible.
Yeah. So they've been doing their rehearsals for their upcoming European tour, the one that was postponed.
Yeah.
And they decided to put, since they're in there anyway, the Academy of Music. This is the old, I said Academy of Music. It's the Palladium now. It used to be the Academy of Music. This is the same venue that they did their big, quote unquote, debut show as a signed act for Casablanca when they opened for Iggy and the Stooges and Blue Oyster Cult.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the same venue. But, this is the only show they do in America this year.
Yep.
It's a theater that holds roughly 3,500 people. They have additional shows kind of blocked out dates, for this, we'll do multiple shows here. But Ron Delsner, who's the big promoter in New York, doesn't feel the ticket sales are going strong enough, and they don't do more than just the one show. 3,500 people.
Well, damn.
And I mean, think about it. 1 year to the day before, they were headlining Madison Square Garden for a 2-night stand.
It's one of
two
those
back-to-back sold-out nights at Madison Square Garden. A year later, they struggled to sell out 3,500 seats at the Palladium.
How the mighty have fallen scenarios.
How anyone didn't see this as being like a huge red flag.
And to even further your point, and this while is kind of indebted in this website because I ran across this too. They even promote it.
Yes.
In the only 1980 U.S. performance of Kiss in concert. So they weren't even like, people weren't even kind of looking at it going, oh, we might kind of catch them later. They promoted this as like, if you want to catch Kiss this year, this is your only chance.
Well, that kind of hype could also have been read two ways, though. There could be people, oh, that's bullshit. They'll be playing this year. But you don't know
anytime
that.
they announce a farewell tour.
2 days later.
It was sold out, though.
Yeah. But they, like I said, the sales were sluggish.
Yeah.
And they didn't put additional dates up.
Nope.
2 days later, July 27th, they tape an episode of a TV show called Kids Are People Too.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that show was syndicated. Apparently it was on ABC, but I have a vague memory of it being on, but they showed it like where I lived when I was a kid. It came on at like 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning or something.
Now,
they never showed that. I don't remember seeing this.
Now, how was... Oh, okay. I was going to ask how your reception was for Eric Carr in the band.
Well, see, now we didn't see him. I'll get to this in a minute, but right now, like this thing here, this Kids Are People Too, this is the introduction of Eric Carr for their national introduction on this kids show.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. But on August 18th, People Magazine issue comes out with Kiss on the cover, and that's where we first got our first good look.
And I remember that photo too, yeah.
Of what Eric Carr looked like, and that was a big thing for us. So the reception for us was good. And that was, here's where the thing with Eric Carr worked, I think, for Kiss fans. Even though their popularity had been in decline, for the diehard fans that were still there, and they really seemed to readily accept them. And I think part of it was because there was sort of a vicarious thrill of seeing what you would perceive as one of us making it. And wow, what if that happened to you? Was kind of like, wow, wouldn't it be? How cool is this? This guy gets to be in Kiss.
And the thing is contrary to what kind of Gene and Paul, well, mainly Paul, kind of throw at it later. I liked his persona. I liked the Fox. I thought the makeup looked good. I thought it was a decent costume. I agree. It wasn't bad.
So this answers the quandary about how do you replace Peter Criss? And this is the best possible scenario that you could ever hope to have happen.
Yep.
You have a guy, he's unknown. He's able to come up with a clever persona that, you know, it's organic. It's like in pro wrestling, where the best pro wrestling gimmicks are always when you just take something that's of that person and amplify it times 10. You know, when you assign a character to a guy, it doesn't ever work quite the same way.
And it's like he had huge hair, bigger than Paul's even. So it's like it worked for just that kind of big bushy persona.
I guess everything. I mean, it just worked, and the fans accepted it. Like I said, I think there was a vicariousness to it. And so he was very readily accepted.
And if you watch him play, he's just crushing it.
Yeah, but well, you know, I mean, I guess we could talk about this now, but I don't want to eat up more showtime talking about it. But you know, is he really the right drummer for Kiss?
Well,
we'll have to wait and see how that goes.
I'd say that goes
because he's a very different drummer from Peter Criss. Very different. And when you alter that formula that strongly, you're going to get a very different kind of band.
And actually, in between his debut show and then that magazine coming out, they also had a canceled Mexican tour because they couldn't get the permits.
Right. Yeah. That fell through, and so, but they have this, European tour from basically. I've got it August 29th through October 16th. Is that right? So that's really the late summer,
and that's
early
still
fall.
Technically included as the Dynasty tour. Like this isn't even labeled the Unmasked tour yet.
It was supposed to be part of an extension. It was supposed to be the European leg of the Dynasty tour, but it becomes the first part of what would be Unmasked.
Yeah, technically when they get to Italy, that's when it starts up the Unmasked tour.
Projected gross for this tour is 0. And the projected loss is $500,000.
God.
Because they cannot not be Kiss, you know. Let's not take the flying rig. That takes 2 trucks of its own just to carry. Nope, gotta have it.
Yeah. And then September 1st is when they filmed that infamous
rock pop lip sync. Yep, I had the same thing. She's So European and Talk to Me.
And wasn't that the same day that they were filming all the Kisteria stuff for news? And that's when you've got the Ace going, "Look, it's rock and roll."
I don't know. I don't know.
Because I know that was during this tour, and that's where they were just trying to get them to do the "Hey, this is Gene Simmons of Kiss, and I'd like to introduce you to."
Well, what's interesting about this rock pop thing is if you watch it, the crowd looks supremely unimpressed. Any crowd shots, and they're all just sort of sitting there like with this smug look, like, what the hell? This is some dumb shit. So, you know, I think that's also showing that the cracks are very deep. I've got some notable, or at least one notable date on the European tour is in Milano, Italy, when political activists protest the show by kind of invading the crowd and basically storming the stage and forcing the band off stage. There's a lot of different stories about this. It's kind of a well-known story where they get chased down through the corridors of I guess there's like I don't know if it's like underground or what.
Yeah, they have weird like kind of underground walking systems. Yeah,
and they get, you know, locked into a dressing room, and you know, different people. I've heard different variations of the story. You know, they tell the story like they were going to kill us.
Yeah,
you know, and they probably felt like that. They were very terrified. But then I hear stories from like their costumer Pixie Esmond. Kind of mocking them for being so scared, you know,
but it also wasn't her life in danger.
Yeah, it's true. But you know, apparently, like the road crew kind of put it in additional security, put it all hefty, you know, put it in hand pretty quick.
Right.
But it was only like 12 or 20 of these guys that did this, apparently.
Right.
And apparently, this was normal for rock concerts in
so
in
like
Italy
even
at the time.
so even like
This
the
was-
security guards were like, we've got this.
We've done this. Yeah.
This is nothing.
But I don't know. The story, as I understood it, was like it just depended on who. Basically, these little political factions were basically just glorified gangs, street gangs, and depending, and they would have every so often the balance of power would shift between these street gangs, and the local promoters would align with whoever was the most powerful political party at the time, and and if the other one would always try to sabotage or whatever. It was just part of the color of the local scene at that time, according to what that's how Chris Lent put it. He's like, in hindsight, but at the time, I'm sure that was probably scary for them. They get chased away off the stage by a millet. But then again, at the same time, this was at the time
I'd
when
love to see video footage of that.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
There was I can remember from that era as a kid, there was something called the Red Brigade, I think. And they kidnapped an American general, and they had him tied to a chair for like 3 days, and they put headphones on him and blasted heavy metal music on the headphones to torture him, which I always thought was kind of fucking fun.
Right.
Come to find out, it's actually what makes the world go round on
Right.
repeat.
It was like this American general, probably like, whatever. It's just funny to me, but I'm sure it wasn't funny to him, and I'm sure it was scary at the time, but whatever. Australia and New Zealand. This runs from November 8th to December 3rd. Now, this is the zenith of
And it canceled Japan tour too.
I don't have that.
Yeah, from, let's see, October 20th to the 30th, they were supposed to be in Tokyo, Kato, Nagoya, and Osaka.
I wonder what happened there.
I'm not sure.
See, I didn't come up on that.
Yeah, I don't have any clickable read more info links.
Right.
It's just
Nothing
all of
else
those
to talk
dates
about.
next to it is just canceled.
Well, this Australian run is the absolute peak of Kiss Mania anywhere in the world.
Yep.
I don't think they were as big in America as they are in Australia during this period. And that includes the Dynasty album. Before they didn't tour over there for Dynasty, but Dynasty was a massive album over there, and this album is equally massive. And this is what, Americans tend to remember 77, 78 is the peak, and 78, 9, and 80 is what's remembered in Australia.
It's weird. Like the first Kiss DVD I ever got was when they played with the Symphony, and they talked to Australian fans outside the arena, and they're like, I hope they play, Shandy. I hope they play, Dirty Living and this, that, and the other, all naming Dynasty and Unmasked tracks.
Well, they pronounce it Dynasty.
Dynasty, yes.
And Shandy was a big hit there. Shandy was, I think, like a #1 hit down there. And it is claimed that 1 in 14 Australians own a Kiss album.
Huh.
And the media coverage is massive. I mean, they are front page news. They are lead story on the evening news. It's magazines, it's television, it's radio. I mean, it's Kiss mania. It's Beatlemania.
Yeah.
And that's how big this is in that period. The merchandising is perhaps even greater than America. And it's not controlled by a coin. It's 20th Century Fox merchandising.
Yep.
Let's see, I guess the tour starts with the only arena shows they do there, but it's 4 nights in Perth, Australia, all sold out.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's 10,000 people a night. So
it's a good ego boost for them.
That's 40,000 people in one city. That's a stadium show.
Mm-hmm. And it's but some of the gigs they were playing half filled.
But the rest of the shows are stadium shows. Yeah, but I think all those shows still did really, really, really well.
It's all things considered.
All things considered. They get presented with the key to the city in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Large public event. If you watch you can see footage of that, thousands of people in the street.
That's the footage of Gene dangling his boot over the ledge and Paul coming out doing the big kissy arms thing.
Interestingly enough, Elton John is in Sydney at the same time, and he attends an after show party, but I'm not sure if he attends the show itself or not. But I just find it interesting. This isn't the first time Elton John has been to a Kiss concert, so it wouldn't, it's just interesting to me that Elton John digs Kiss.
Yeah.
And likes to hang out with them or whatever.
Well, he
sees
probably
them as
saw the
equals.
He probably saw the, and this is weird, but just hanging with his. He probably saw the weird artisticness of it and was intrigued. Like, oh, it's guys in makeup making rock and roll music. This is interesting. This is artsy.
It's as equally interesting now that we don't see them as equals as they probably did at the time. We still see Elton John as something bigger than Kiss.
Well, because he probably did bigger stuff throughout the 80s. He continued to grow.
Yeah. Well, I think he was always bigger than Kiss, but...
Well, he did the flamboyant stage show as well. Elton John did.
His fan base was probably a lot more wide.
Yeah.
And obviously more mainstream. So... Paul is dating an actress named Leslie Ann Warren at this period, and she's filming a movie called The Treasure of Yankee Zephyr.
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
The Treasure of the Yankee Zephyr. And she's in New Zealand. And he decides to rent a plane to go see her.
A helicopter.
Was it a helicopter or a plane?
I'm pretty sure a helicopter because he landed on set, didn't he?
I read, that supposedly with his showing up ruined a day's footage or something.
Okay. I was making sure that's what it was. Yes. So he shows up in a helicopter and lands basically in the parking lot, like the field next to where they're shooting this movie.
Good job, Paul. I'm sure she loved that.
Supposedly this visit only lasts a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And costs it's reported that it costs $25,000 to make this trip.
Mm-hmm.
And Kiss already has New Zealand dates scheduled for the following week. So this is additional expense.
Yeah.
I just wanted to come see my baby in New Zealand.
I just wanted to see her. I just wanted to see if, she would have a good movie if she had a star in her crotch.
God damn it, Paul! You ruined it again.
Can I be in the movie?
And of course, they break up like weeks after. So whatever.
That's always what happens.
But this, the whole Australian thing. That's we're kind of glossing over about because it's such a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's massive.
It really
I don't
is.
think massive really is the right word because I think it's so much more bigger than that.
And it's bigger than what was happening in the U.S. because the U.S. was always getting a slow trickle of it.
And
all of a sudden it pops hard over there and now they're finally there. So it's like Beatle kind of hysteria when they came to the U.S.
But it crests at the same time as the U.S. popularity because as this ends, their popularity ends there. That wave, that fad.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to use that word, but it keeps coming back to it. Mm-hmm. Kiss was a fad.
Yeah.
For people that weren't diehard Kiss fans, that era where they became so big is really just a fad era, mm-hmm. and that's kind of what I meant at the beginning of the episode, where it's like they used to be this cult band that had this dedicated follower of people that they felt like they were the kings of the outsiders, and it was like, these are our heroes. This is what they represent our hopes and dreams and aspirations and these over the top personas, and it's like, it's an outsider thing, and then they become very mainstream, mm-hmm. and they alienate that fan base, and that fan base goes, whoo, and now they've got this other fan base that's not going to sustain because it's just a temporary thing. It's a fad. And once it's over, it's all over. They've burned the candle at both ends, and there's nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. These last shows are in New Zealand. I've got Wellington, New Zealand. It says 19,000 out of 40,000 tickets sold. Now, still 20,000 people. Yeah. That's still impressive, but it's an outdoor 40,000 seat thing. And then December 3rd, it's notable show because this is in Auckland, New Zealand. It's the final full show that they do with Ace Frehley.
Yep.
So not only now we're seeing all this, it's all coming down to their last big year.
Mm-hmm.
The success of, it's interesting to note the overhead costs for the 2 New Zealand shows wipes away all of the profits from their promoters for the whole Australia New Zealand part.
Who's handling the books? Is it Howard Marks?
That's what I was about to say. It's like it feels like with the amount of touring they've done, they would be able to see how much the overhead is going to be.
They were presented with the invoices up ahead. That's what I'm saying. It was like they were told, scale back, tone down, do something. Let's go. Nope, can't do it. Got to be Kiss. Can't you remember what we said on the previous episode? It's cheaper than not touring.
Yeah,
which isn't just an arrogant,
which makes no
ugly
sense.
way of looking at it. It's like, you're losing money. Yeah, it is cheaper than not touring. Or it's not cheaper than not touring. It's,
you know what I mean. Yeah.
So it's like they get it. They've just, and the fad is over. This is important because like at the end of this, it's like the Australian promoters, they feel jilted because they've put so much time and energy, and this thing is the biggest thing in the world, and now it's like they've come away with nothing.
Yeah.
The overhead and the expense leaves Kiss with hardly anything. I mean, they make a profit, but not really nothing.
Yeah.
And,
and no one's starting to not care in the U.S.
And there's nowhere to go. And, Super Kiss is over. And in a really, very real sense, Kiss is over.
And no one's
because everything they do from here on out is never going to be the same.
Yeah.
Ever. At all, on any level.
And no one's more jaded than their lead guitar player.
Yeah, you got, but I think that's
and again,
still...
I find that so bizarre, especially because, like, he got 3 songs on the record, and they got all this crazy amount of success overseas. So it seems like there would still be enough to be placating him,
he may
if
not
that
be
makes
there
any sense.
yet. We've got, what we're getting ready to get into is probably really what's going to it's going to throw a lot of people sideways, not just Ace, but we'll talk about that in the next episode where things are going to get really interesting, I guess.
There's a lot.
Or really curious anyway.
Yeah. I highly doubt we're going to be spending a lot of time on the track by track, but more or less everything that is surrounding this record.
Well, we'll do both.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully you guys will join us as we kind of tackle the anomalous music from the Elder.
Yes, it's going to be very interesting.
Possibly the greatest worst album of all time.
I don't know. We'll have to discuss that. I have interesting thoughts on that record.
Is it so bad it's good?
Well, my perspective of it is going to be kind of skewed because I can remember that as a new album as well. So it still holds a nostalgic place for me.
Right.
But we'll talk about all that, and hopefully you guys will join us. And until then, for Cap and Alex, I'm Russ, and we'll talk to you next time on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.